So you've got this 4,000-ton wind turbine that produces 8 megawatts of electricity, spinning at 290 miles an hour, but stop it if a sparrow happens to come along. If you really care about the birds, you shouldn't have built these wind turbines in the first place. We should be using nuclear. Should be using thorium, right? You know thorium? You can't make bombs out of it. That's true. That's exactly right. Because, believe it or not, thorium has been used as a nuclear fuel since the 1950s. And one test reactor is actually in Chatuchak. And they actually burned thorium in there, I guess in the 60s or 70s, in Chatuchak. They have an underground nuclear reactor, test reactor. Yeah, we should have been using, but Israel, America, and Russia didn't. They wanted a uranium industry, so they didn't pursue thorium. Thorium is far more efficient because you burn the entire fuel stock. Uranium, you can only burn 5% of it, and you have to take it out and reprocess and put back in. Thorium, you can burn the whole lot. So it's far, far more efficient and cheaper, and thorium is cheaper. But no, Germany shut down their nuclear reactors, bought their gas from Russia. Do you remember this? Donald Trump goes over and says to them, your entire economy is reliant on the Russians to supply you with gas, and they can hold you to ransom. This is on YouTube, and these Germans are there going, who's this idiot? Sniggering into, it's on YouTube, and they're sniggering into their hands. And then look what happened. So he was right about that too. Anyway, you came here for Dharma, right? If you came in late, we were just discussing, I'm planning to go to Germany this year, next year. And so we were just discussing Germany, and German stuff. Well, it started with Germany, and then he said, why not? He said, why not go to the UK? Part of it is opportunity, right? The spiritual director of the place in Germany is a friend of mine. So he said, go and I'll give you the air ticket. So I'm off. The truth is, my visa was up and my temple wouldn't give me the documents for a TM30. I was losing my visa until last week. And so I planned this as an escape route because I have to go somewhere. I had a few days left on my visa. And so I committed to going. Now I have to go, which is all right. I don't mind. Finally got the right documents off the temple, but had to really fight hard for it. Get senior monks to come and... Passport went in today at the British Embassy. I get to the British Embassy. They say you have to scan your bag. Fine, I put my bag in the thing, emptied my pockets, and I had a thumb drive in my pocket. It's this big. No thumb drives allowed. If I hadn't pulled it out of my pocket, they would never have known it was in there. I said to the guy on the door, can you just hold it for me? No. Can I leave it on the floor here? You can't leave things unattended. I had to go and find a coffee shop and ask a person in the coffee shop, can you hold this little thumb drive so I don't get arrested going into the British Embassy? So that was fun.
Which building is it in? Is it Ramadan?
Yes, so it's not actually the embassy.
It's not.
It's a...
Consulate?
No, it's a private company that the embassy used to handle the visa applications.
Many embassies are visa.
Huh?
It's done by many embassies also for visa.
Okay. They were pretty good when I got in. It was actually quite straightforward. It's only 4 pages of forms to fill out. It's like, what? You don't need to know my grandfather's shoe size?
12 forms of every page.
I did have to photocopy in colour every page, including the blank ones. It's quite expensive.
So what are they doing to your passport?
Well, now, they used to send your passport off, so you have to time it so you're not going to use your passport. And since Brexit, it had gone from 12 days to 16 weeks waiting for a passport. Blue. I get blue now. I don't know those filthy red passports. I got a blue one, British blue passport. But she just said to me, 4 weeks is the average at the moment.
So you're getting a new passport?
Yeah, within 4 weeks, which is okay. But now they give let you keep your passport while the new one is being done, which is great. I didn't know about that. I'm going to speak to your dad about this. This TM30 business is just...
Do you think you should apply for Thai citizenship?
That's immigration, not foreign affairs.
What?
That's immigration, which is part of police, which is part of Interior Ministry.
What's immigration?
Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Interior Affairs.
Yeah, but what?
TM30.
Right, it's immigration.
People of foreign affairs, they don't influence that.
Right. Now, Marissa has a 5-year visa and she doesn't do any of it. No TM30, no 90-day reporting, nothing. She's got 5 years in her passport, and it's not fair. I should have more privilege than she does. Yeah, got 5-year passport. The citizenship is you apply through the police, not immigration. So it's a totally different system.
Immigration is part of the police.
Yeah, but it's a different thing. You go to the police station and you don't go through immigration for the citizenship. You have to pay tax and things like that. So if they gave it to me, I'd have to annulum, right? You have to have someone pulling the strings, basically. So Ajahn Achalo got one. You know, he got it off the king. He's a pretty good string puller. He was granted a citizenship. But then it's not easy. To leave the country, I have to get a letter from the Ministry of Buddhism if I'm on a Thai passport. Monks aren't allowed to leave Thailand, like you can leave Thailand on a passport. Monks have to get a letter from the Ministry of Buddhism in order to leave Thailand. And that has to pass through like 6 different offices. And then it's not clear. Yeah, really. My friend was going with a bunch of, I think, 8 monks to Finland. And the temple, Wat Po, they refused him. They said, you don't need 8 monks, 3 of you can go. Just off on a whim, off his head. There's no rule that he's applying here. Just the guy who signs it was like, no, 3 of you is enough. So he took me there to try and say, you know, I'm really connected with foreigners. I wondered why he was so friendly. He turned up, oh, let me take you out for lunch. Oh, we're going near this temple. Let's just call in this office. Just sit there while I talk to this senior monk. And then he was arguing with the monk and pointing at me, and I'm being used for nefarious purposes. Okay, we can start our session. If anyone's new here this week, we sit together for 30 minutes or so, and I will offer up some talk, some time for questions, and we will be finished by 8 o'clock. Is anybody completely new to meditation? Okay. So settle yourself into a comfortable posture. For those who are new to meditation or would like to follow my recommendations, I'd recommend that you find the feeling of the breath as it runs through the center of the body. Lifting the eyes upwards slightly, bring attention in from the level of the eyes, and then the feeling down in the body. The breath runs, the feeling of the breath runs straight down the center of the body, from the top of the head right to the base. The physical sensation of the breath. Make the determination to put attention on the breathing. Follow each breath as it begins, lasts for a while, and then stops. You might also notice the gap between the breaths. As you follow the breathing, the mind very quickly will figure out the breath goes in, the breath goes out, and the mind will turn its attention to other things, more interesting things. It wants to think about what you're going to eat for dinner, where you're going to go after today, where you will go next week. It wants to think about politics and sports and weather and engineering, all the things that interest you. So note one by one as each distraction comes up to try and steal your attention. Make the determination to interrupt whatever story it is that's coming up, trying to steal your attention away. The lure and the attraction of topics of thought are called attachment. Our ability to keep the attention on the breath and not be drawn into distraction is called breaking attachment or non-attachment. Train yourself to be content with just this simple, neutral feeling of the breath. Train yourself not to be pulled along by the mind that always seeks something interesting, something exciting, something important to think about. If it's helpful, you can note as attention goes out to thinking, to stories. You can note thinking. Pull your attention back to the breath, inside the body. Or if a sound around us distracts you, you can note hearing, and then bring attention back to the breath. You may have physical feelings crowding into consciousness. You just note feeling. Bring your attention back. The only feeling that we should be interested in is this feeling of the breath running through the body. Or if your meditation becomes refined, the feeling of consciousness suffused through the entire body. Be willing to interrupt these conscious processes. Bring yourself back to the breath 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times. Be patient. This is a lifelong practice. For the final few minutes of the meditation, turn your attention to the thought, feeling and perception of universal loving kindness. Try to arouse this feeling any way that you can. You can use the imagination, use the words, may all beings be happy, peaceful, free from suffering. You can imagine visualization, light radiating from the center of your being. You may call into mind people living or passed away for whom it's easy to arouse loving kindness. Latch onto that feeling and offer outwards to all beings. Any way that you can use is good to conjure up the thought, feeling and perception of loving kindness radiating from yourself, sharing with all world beings, including your own self. This practice of loving kindness is supposed to make you one who is loved by the devas. It's supposed to make you sleep well at night and be a protection against any unwholesome or bad intentioned spirits or devas. This is called a beautiful mind, sobana citta. Practice this beautiful mind state so that it's easy for it to arise in the future. Sabbe buddha balapata pachekanancha yang balang arahanta nancha te jena rakang bandami sabhaso sabba buddha nubhavena sattha soti bhavantu te sabbe buddha balapata pachekanancha yang balang arahanta nancha te jena rakang bandami sabhaso Sabba dhamma nubhavena sattha soti bhavantu te Sabbe buddha balapata pachekanancha yang balang Arahanta nancha te jena rakang bandami sabba so Sabba sangha nubhavena sattha soti bhavantu te. Okay, good. Since this is my last time here for a while, I wanted to go through more or less the whole path from here to enlightenment. It's important to realize that, or to understand, that even Buddhism is a set of concepts. a set of ideas. Now we can put those ideas to good use, but they're still just a set of ideas. They're not something that we adhere to or hold on to as an ultimate truth or as something to be worshipped. It's just something that we can use. So even the concepts in Buddhism are only good to the extent that you put them to good use. If we simply study or learn about these teachings, but we don't put them to use, we don't change, we don't grow, then you stay the same. But it's like being in a prison cell and being given the key to unlock the door, and then worshipping the key on the wall and venerating, "O thou wonderful key, thou art the key to my salvation," but never actually using it to unlock the door. So all mystic traditions or enlightenment traditions fall into this category. And there's actually, when we apply in this attention in this way, there's little difference between the mystic traditions of Christianity or Sufi, different traditions within Buddhism. Every culture around the world has had those saints and sages and yogis who have withdrawn from regular daily life and existence, turned the attention inwards, and have found this mystic path. It's called mystic because it's a mystery for normal people. It's not something that can be explained. It's only something that can be tasted, touched, and known directly. So in Buddhism, we don't teach what the ultimate goal is. We call it nibbana or sambodhi, awakening. Other words, unbinding, the goal, the purpose of the holy life, lots of different words that we use for it. But we don't say what it is. What we're interested in is what you can do to come across or come upon this understanding directly for yourself. So to do that, we take up certain spiritual practices, and this is why Buddhism certainly is focused on the practices of what you can do rather than interesting or great concepts. If you want good concepts about enlightenment, there's a book called I Am That. Has anyone read that book? Seen it? Nobody? It's one of the classics. I mean, it'll befuddle the heck out of you, but Nisargadatta Maharaj, an Indian guru, and he talks about the enlightened mind. Yeah, it's really fascinating, but it doesn't help you very much.
So what is the name again?
I Am That is the book. You can find it for free, lots of places. And it's just questions and answers with this kind of crazy Indian guy. And you can pick it up and drop it at any point. There's no pathway there. He just answers questions. Nisargadatta Maharaj was his name. Yeah. I met someone who was a close disciple of his. And I said, you know, I read that I Am That. I said, but he seems like he's a really bad-tempered, grumpy man. And this guy who was a disciple of Nisargadatta's for many years started laughing at me, and he said he was the most awful, cantankerous person you could ever meet. But he was enlightened, so we assume and understand. It's important to note that enlightenment, whatever this thing is not your character. Normally you think of a spiritual being as somebody with a lovely character. This is where I fall short on that one. I'm a little cantankerous myself and a little foul-tempered. I actually swore today at somebody because he wouldn't let me in to renew my passport at the British Embassy because I had a thumb drive in my pocket. And I pulled the thumb drive out to put in my bag, and he said, no thumb drives. Like, you wouldn't have known that if I hadn't just pulled it out my pocket. And he wouldn't. I said, can you hold it for me? No. I said, can I put it on the floor outside? No. And I had to go and find a coffee shop and say, can you hold this little minute thumb drive for me? Because the British Embassy thinks it's a bomb. Anyway, I swore at the kid. So, spiritual qualities of patience and beauty of spirit, these are qualities that we can develop, but they are separate to this point of enlightenment, which is completely other. So, to embark on the path to do this, first of all, we need to practice some renunciation. If you are always outwardly striving for money, position, standing, what's the word for standing? Status, then your attention is always directed outwards. So you have to be able to practice some kind of renunciation, to say, okay, I have enough now, to put aside worldly concerns, turn the attention back. So for monks, we practice this fourfold refuge. So we use just the robes are good enough clothing, just the hut that we have in the temple is a good enough hut. Just the food that we receive from people is good enough food. And just the medicine is good enough medicine. Unfortunately, the scriptures say that that medicine is made from fermented urine, so we kind of adapted that one a little bit. But which is how they did it, I guess, in the day. So this is a fourfold refuge that we, as monks, we are taught to be content with little, or content with just enough that's going to keep us sustained. If you don't have that that renunciate mindset to begin with, your attention is always directed outwards. Now, you may have a business, you may have family, you may have mortgages, you have to look after. So you have to find that balance within yourself. You know when everything is set up good enough that you can start to turn attention around. So we take up practice of morality. That is, in Buddhism, we try not to kill living beings, we don't steal, refrain from sexual misconduct, we keep our speech pleasant. And after I swore at somebody, I can't really talk too much about that. I've had 2 months of frustration with this. This poor guy got it, both barrels today, but it wasn't his fault, I suppose. So for speech, we look after our speech and refraining from drink, drugs, or drugs and alcohol. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to undertake this as a lifelong practice. It means you undertake it for a period of time. So in the Buddhist time, people would go to the forest and then go and practice with the monks and the nuns. And while they're doing that practice for a few days or a few weeks, then they undertake all of the precepts. So they're not lifelong vows. So if you have had a glass of wine in 1982, it doesn't mean that you're now disbarred from any spiritual enlightenment. These are just ways to control the behavior, to bring the mind onto an even keel. You may note the people who are controlled by drink or drugs or do it excessively, they are unbalanced. They have a disbalance within them. Those people who keep things in moderation have a balance and a beauty to their character and their nature. So you have to take up some kind of moral standards. Living immorally will disturb your heart, will disturb your soul, and certainly when you meditate then, it will be very hard to find stillness and stability because the mind is agitated. You can test this directly for yourself. You can try it out. All of these things are supposed to be tried out and practiced. They're not teachings of absolute truth. They're suggestions for the way for you to practice and investigate. So then we practice good qualities of mind, being content with little, having a renunciate practice, moral practice. We practice good qualities of mind. Now these aren't hard to understand. You can pretty much go to any group of people, which I've done before, business groups, for example, and there's usually some Muslim and some atheists and some Buddhists and some Chinese and some kinds of different people. And then if you ask, what are good qualities? You can pretty much go to any group and you're going to get the same list of good qualities, no matter what their backgrounds are. Same if you ask, what are bad qualities? You're pretty much going to get the same list of bad qualities. There are a few things that would come higher up on the list for different people. Buddhists would have mindfulness as a good quality, would come high up on our list probably. Christians would have forgiveness quite high up on their list. But these are not things that belong to one religion or another. So we practice good qualities. The thing with good qualities, or sobanajita, beautiful states of mind, is that for most people we don't spend very much time deliberately doing it. So this is why we do things like metta, loving kindness. You find ways to call it into your mind and conjure it up. The law of the psyche, according to the Buddha, was that which a man thinks and ponders often, there is a leaning in the mind, or a bias in the mind. This is a direct quote. What that means is if you do something regularly, it becomes easier to do that thing again. This, again, is pure psychodynamics. It's not a religious declaration. It's something that you can investigate for yourself. I went to one house of a person, a Thai woman, and we were going to an event, and she wanted to call in her house to pick some things up. And I went in, and her husband was there in the house, and he had this giant TV screen. He was in his mid-40s. Giant TV screen, and he was there playing video games. And she said, "Oh, this is Venerable Pandit," and he went, "Eh." "Hi, I've just come to rob your house and burn everything down." So if you do that regularly, if when you get home you turn on a video game and you start playing it, it gets easier to do that again. Same for watching TV, same for drinking alcohol, same for messages on the phone. Even when you're meditating, you can be sending messages, checking Facebook. If you keep doing it, it makes it easier to do that thing again. So you take time and make the effort to conjure up these beautiful states of mind. Usually in Buddhism we have four. Universal loving kindness, this loving kindness for all world beings. Even the guy in front of the British Embassy, he won't let me in with a thumb drive. Not that I'm bitter. Universal loving kindness. And it is really powerful when you do it. It took me a long, long time to do this. I'm very technical minded, so I like mindfulness and concentration, but like universal loving kindness is a little kumbaya for my taste. It took me a long, long time before I learned to do it. And when you can hook into it and that beautiful mind state, it's really powerful. Mudita is sympathetic joy, so joy for other people's success. And there's often that thing when people are successful that you always kind of find a way to criticize them a little bit, right? You never quite happy for other people and their success. And Elon Musk, he catches a giant space rocket in a pair of chopsticks. And, wow, he's a genius. Like, yeah, but he supports Donald Trump, or his Hyperloop failed miserably. There's always something that kind of wants to make you tear down other people's joy or success. So mudita is that beautiful taking joy in other people's joy and success. Again, it is a really powerful teaching when you have practiced it. If you've practiced it, it becomes easy to touch on, easy to remember, easy to call up. If you never spend any time deliberately conjuring up these beautiful mind states, they're difficult to arouse, difficult to bring up. Compassion is feeling for other people's pain and suffering. And then upekkha, which is equanimity. It's an equanimity, I prefer to call it equipoise, because again, it's quite a powerful state of mind when you can hook into it. And it's very pinpoint and crisp. Equanimity is not kind of like, well, I don't really care, like, nah, I don't care about people. Some Buddhists kind of do this because they want to practice non-attachment. So it's like, well, I don't care about this, and I don't care about this, and I'm unattached. And usually they don't last very long as monks if they have that attitude. We see this quite a lot with people who come in, they ordain as monks with really good intentions, but they're kind of fooling themselves quite a lot. So they're always the entire tamatamo, right, is the word. Like overzealous, pious, well, I don't know in English. And yes, and they'll pretend like... The story goes that Ajahn Amaro, he denies it, but when they were in Wat Pah Nanachat, the temple north of Thailand, and in the afternoon a drink would be offered, and sometimes it's tea, sometimes it's coffee. One time it was Coca-Cola, and he's such a renunciate who has no interest in worldly things that he took the coffee and the Coca-Cola and mixed it all up and handed it out, much to everybody's chagrin. But that's a kind of egotistical way, right? Like, I don't care. Equanimity is equipoise, where the consciousness is pinpoint and crisp. Again, it's a really powerful state of mind. So we practice good states of mind, is the next thing, so that they're easy to arouse again in the future. And we practice the guarding of the senses. What this means is, consciousness, by its nature, the architecture of consciousness, means one thing at a time arises. We can't hold in the mind more than one thing at a time. If you don't believe that, try it. Try to listen to an air conditioner and feel the feelings in your foot at the same time. Try and think about what you're going to have for dinner, and is Donald Trump going to cause World War III at the same time? You can't do it. You can't hold more than one thing in the mind at a time. Now, this is really an interesting topic and fascinated me, because I always thought that I can hold more than one thing in my mind. Can I hold all of you in my mind at the same time? Is that plural? Or is that one thing? Is that the audience? So it's worth investigating. See if this is true. See if you can hold different things in the mind at the same time. What we should see then with mindfulness practice is one thing arises and you think about this thing and you react to this thing. Then it fizzles out, disappears, and something else comes in. So while you were meditating just now, how many stories came up? Did you start to think about dinner, what you're going to eat? Did you start to think about where you're going to go on holiday? Did you start to think about partners and relationships? My friend in Canada, he just got a Tesla Cybertruck to test drive. He didn't buy it. So So what happens? Tesla test drive, Tesla Cybertruck comes into your mind, and you react, you like it or you dislike it, there's a story about it, it draws you in, and then you remember, oh, I was meditating. Come back to the breath. Doesn't feel like a very good trade. The feeling of the breath for this Tesla Cybertruck. It is a good trade because the Tesla Cybertruck is just a thought. It's not real. It's something that's just arisen as a story and is trying to grab your attention. So note, watch this in meditation. Watch how one thing comes in, tries to draw you in. Maybe you get lost for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. If you're living in a monastery, it can be days you get lost. There's not much to distract you. Then it will fizzle out, something else will come in. And it's one thing. It's like those old slide projectors. Maybe you need to be a certain age, but you'd get your holiday snaps printed on slides and you'd have a projector and and your picture comes up and then next picture comes up. This is what your mind is doing if you look at it. Again, this is not religious teaching or belief. This is something you can investigate and see for yourself. So the idea that things are really existing in the world, that's called Maya or delusion. Or the conceptual world. So in the conceptual world there are cyber trucks, Tesla Cybertrucks, there are visa applications, there are what? Make your own bread machines. Yeah. So these things really exist in the world, and relationships and mortgages and houses and these kind of things. But when you bring attention into what's actually real, what's happening is one thing comes in, tries to get your attention, vanishes, another thing comes in, tries to get your attention, vanishes, and another thing. So as a meditator, we want to start to watch this process. The Buddha described all of these objects of perception that come into your mind as like a piece of foam on a river. It looks like a piece of foam is something coming down the river, but if you grab at it, you find there's nothing there. He said there was 5 things, I can only remember 4. Like a piece of foam, like a bubble that gets popped, like a banana tree, because a banana tree that has no heartwood, if you cut it, it just has layers and layers. It doesn't have a heartwood in it. And like a magic show. Consciousness is like a magic show. So he said all of these things, when they come into your attention, are, if you're viewing them as they really are in the present moment, they have this quality. Foam-like, bubble-like, banana tree-like, and like a magic show. So you start to withdraw attention from that and lodge attention into this still point inside. Several insights should be afforded to you at the time. One of the most important is that your thinking is not you, is not real. This is a really, really important insight that's can be understood intellectually but has to be seen directly. That is the thoughts that come into your head that say, I like this, I don't like this, I have to do this, I want this, this is the way things should be, that's the way things shouldn't be. These thoughts are not real and they're not really you. You only get this insight by watching them directly. And then you start to see all kinds of thoughts come in, thoughts that you didn't want, thoughts you don't agree with. You've had thoughts about beating people up and killing them. You've had thoughts about building things. Sometimes I think like I really want something, and I catch the thought. And the thought's saying, I really, really want this thing, usually food. And then you like, wait, I didn't call that thought up. Where did it come from? It's not me thinking it. It just came in and spoke inside my head. So the insight is that thoughts are not really you. They come and they go and they afflict you. So to a meditator, we start to see thinking as it arises, as it lasts, and thinking becomes uncomfortable. It becomes something that afflicts you. This is when meditators say, I can't meditate, my mind is too busy. I can't have all these thoughts. This means you're progressing in the right way because you're starting to see the non-self nature of your own thinking. Don't believe your own thoughts. They're not true. They're not real. You still have to act in the world. You still have to have some beliefs and things. So don't carry it out to the absolute maximum. But you get this distrust. Especially when the mind says, like, I can't do something, or I have to have something, or I like or dislike something. Don't trust the mind. It's really not helping you. So seeing thoughts as not yourself is when you start to feel them afflicting you. This is a really important step. Thoughts create Maya, illusion or delusionary world. As you're willing to step outside of the thinking process and go into direct experiencing process, this Maya, this conceptual universe, starts to evaporate like foam on the river. The second really important insight is to have the attention directed inwards. So mindfulness, as it's initially taught, is if you're washing the dishes, be mindful of washing the dishes. If you're walking down the street, be mindful of walking down the street. If you are lying down to sleep, be mindful that you are lying down to sleep. In the suttas, in the scripture, it says this, called Iriya Bot Yoi in Thai, refined attention. And it says the monk is aware when he reaches forth or withdraws his hand. He's aware when he picks up the bowl. He's aware when he walks. He's aware when he urinates or defecates. Refined movement, so you have attention on what you are doing. But this is still directing attention outwards. So the next part of mindfulness is you also have to have direct attention directed inwards. This is me liking and disliking things. This is me resisting something or trying to get something. This is me being drawn into lust, desire, hatred, anger, jealousy. Always the attention is inwards. You become less and less concerned about the external world and more concerned with this pushing and pulling in your own citta, in your own consciousness. You'll start to see all kinds of things arising and ceasing. Just one example, I currently have a bad back. Now I'm pretty tough, I'm quite strong normally, but once every 5 years or so, usually when there's a lot of stress going on, and there's something muscular in the bottom of my back that clenches up and it will double me over and I can't walk straight. I was actually like that this morning. I was unable to stand up straight. And then the thoughts come like, oh, this is going to last forever, or I have to get treatment, or I have to cancel my arrangements, or my back's going to be bad, and why is it me? I shouldn't have ridden a motorcycle when I was young, or all kinds of thoughts start piling on top of it. Actually, check the thinking. You watch the reaction to it. The reaction is a resistance. I now know how to do it. I stop. I bring my attention in and I can let that muscle psh, like this. And it stops hurting. I just have to be careful over the next few weeks to not jolt it. So bringing attention inwards. Yes, things happen to you in the world, but 90% of your life is you reacting to the things. Reacting in good, positive ways or non-positive ways. So attention should be concentrated inwards. That's the second most important insight. As we continue practicing, then there is point where you start to concentrate in meditation. So up till now, all of these things involve the way we act in the world. But meditation itself has to be refined. The Buddha continually said to his monks, there are roots of trees, there are caves, there are mountains. Withdraw yourself and turn your attention inwards and concentrate the mind, or bring the mind together. Constantly, over and over, he said this. So, in meditation itself, if you note when the attention goes to an object of perception, thought about Cybertrucks, dinner, cars, mortgages, people, relationships, clothes, food, sport. Did you watch Mike Tyson the other day? I saw some, on the SkyTrain coming here, there's some kids looking at their phone, and I was like, I'm always curious what people are looking at on their phone. They were watching Mike Tyson fighting on the app. So the attention will go out to these. These are called objects of perception. It's a story that's come in, like a slide, and now this pulls you in and you react to it and you create a story around it. There comes a point where you just get tired of attention just going to object after object. You bring the attention into the body and the mind just stops going out to anything. You suddenly hit on an even ground where you have a consistency of self-knowing, self-awareness. This is a brightness, not lights, because those are things you imagine with the eye, but a brightness of attention. As you hold this, suddenly the body will start to energize, the head will come up, and you suddenly snapping into the present moment quite strongly, like, oh. And I can feel every time this starts to get dissipated in an object of perception. The Buddha said the consciousness gathers and unifies and becomes luminous. And this is, again, not a teaching that we venerate. It's something that you can find and experience for yourself. Another couple of features of this gathering of consciousness becomes brighter, becomes more, has a feeling of becoming more powerful. The Buddha's own description of it was like, he said, imagine a charioteer with a team of 4 horses and a chariot, and the horses are fed and they're watered, and they're at a crossroads. Whichever direction he points the horses in, they will go off at high speed, with the chariot, hopefully. So, in the same way, consciousness becomes really powerful, and you feel a gathering of power and energy. The consciousness becomes suffused through the body, like honey being mixed with flour until it's thoroughly mixed, so consciousness becomes absorbed through the body. And you feel yourself sitting here in concentration, in meditation. If you can hold that, you hold. So this practice then of meditation is not concentrating on an object like the breath or loving kindness. It's holding consciousness in restraint. Again, the Buddha used this word, restraint. So you're restraining the mind from going out. He gave an analogy for this. He said, imagine a turtle, and the turtle sees a jackal or a wolf, some dog, sees a jackal in the distance coming its way. So the turtle thinks, I will withdraw all my limbs. Now a turtle has 6 limbs, right? Head, tail, and 4 legs. Does it have arms and legs? Or 4 legs? I don't know. So it withdraws. Now the jackal comes and he looks at the turtle and he wants to eat this tasty turtle. So the jackal thinks, I will wait for this turtle to extend one of its legs, one of its limbs, and then I will bite it off and enjoy my treat. And the turtle thinks, no way I'm going to let any of my limbs out from my shell. Eventually the jackal gives up and wanders away. This was the Buddha's own analogy. He said, in the same way, you hold consciousness in restraint. You don't allow consciousness to go to perceptions of the eye, perceptions of the ear, nose, tongue, body, or thought. This is why turtles always represent Dharma in Buddhism, especially Chinese Buddhism. You might see a turtle with the world on its back. When the turtle's limbs are operating, the world appears. When the turtle's limbs become withdrawn, the scriptures appear on the turtle's back. So this is why in Chinese Buddhism they say the world is carried on the back of a turtle. Then the Western philosophers say, well, what's the turtle standing on? And the answer is, it's turtles all the way down. But it's not that the world is actually carried on the back of a turtle. I don't know why Western philosophers take things so literally. It's a symbol to mean the world appears when the mind operates. When the mind withdraws and holds in restraint, in meditation, you get this gathering of consciousness, brightening of consciousness. If you hold in there, you get a piti, a rapture, it comes through the body. An energization that feels attractive and pleasant. If this arises, follow it. This is the right experience. Many meditation teachers tell you to reject or ignore these kind of experiences, and they are wrong, they're mistaken. It took me 20 years to have the confidence to say that, but I'm telling you, absolutely true. You can follow it and you can feel what tightens or intensifies that rapture and what dissipates it. You can feel when the mind starts to go to objects of thoughts and feelings, and when the attention comes back and consciousness purifies itself. A happiness can arise, a contentment, because purified consciousness by itself is naturally self-fulfilled. It's naturally beautiful and without having to do it. So normally happiness depends on an object of sense. Getting something that you like makes you happy. Marmite on toast makes me happy. I'm a simple guy, that's all I need. Marmite and YouTube, I'm done. But that's happiness depending on an object. You take that object away, the happiness vanishes. Don't try and take my Marmite away. But purified consciousness by itself is naturally self-fulfilled and content. It has nowhere left to go, there's nothing else that it needs to get. So, if these experiences start to arise, note that you're doing things in the right way. Finally, the fourth of these stages was equanimity arises, but again it's a pinpoint equipoise. The mind becomes so pinpoint, crisp and clear. There's no question here that you're falling asleep or your attention has become distracted. Nobody told me this when I first started meditating. Sometimes I would watch the breath and I could lull myself into like a rhythm of, and I'd like rocking a baby to sleep, and then the bell would go and I'd be like, that's a really good meditation. It wasn't. I just lulled my brain into a state of dullness, and I call it peace. It's not it. Real peace, real meditation is pumping with energy, is bright, crisp and vibrant. Just to finish then, I want to go on to the sonic boom. Because what I've described so far is still practices that you do, even the concentration and meditation practices, holding the mind in restraint. You're not using a meditation object per se, but you're still controlling and bringing the mind to a point. There are certain experiences, there are uncertain experiences that occur after that. Buddhism doesn't really deal with them very much. Most Buddhist teachers tell you to reject kind of enlightenment experiences and go back to your practice. But there are uncertain things that start to arise. spontaneously. So you can suddenly find yourself slotting into strange or psychic states of mind in different ways. So I was talking with Marissa the other day, some of you know, our Qigong teacher, and she was talking about when she was doing her Qigong practice, and then suddenly this powerful energy comes straight through the body and her mind just stops still. This isn't, she's not doing this as a practice. She's not making the energy come through the body and a blissful sensation. This is a resultant state. So if you've been doing the practices well, suddenly these things start to arise spontaneously by themselves. One of the ways that you know that it's real is it's not something that you do, it's not something that you intended or you conjured up. It will happen spontaneously by itself, has a characteristic of being very bright, of being extremely alert, of being free from thinking and conceptualizing. And these kind of states can start to appear or manifest by themselves. If they do, enjoy it, congratulate yourself. There was a good text, Christian spiritual text by two interesting people, Saint Teresa of Avila and Saint John of the Cross. And Saint John of the Cross was the disciple of Saint Teresa. And it's quite funny because she's very kind of like all over the place and bright and enthusiastic, and he's very, very dark and dour. But both of them were very powerful teachers. You may have heard of Dark Night of the Soul. Have you heard of that expression? Did you know it's actually a book by St. John of the Cross? It's where the statement comes from. In fact, he was getting it from a poem. He called meditation dark night of the senses, dark night of thought, dark night of memory, and dark night of the soul. Because in the Christian mystic tradition, first of all, you withdraw your attachment from the senses, wanting to have nice food and clothes and places and things. You withdraw the attention from the thoughts, go into the dark night of thought, then from memory, so you're just left with a awareness, what they call awareness of the presence of God. And then dark night of the soul. The book was so heavy I only got through the first three. I'm still not sure what the dark night of the soul is. The first three were pretty severe. But both Saint Teresa and Saint John of the Cross talk about what they call trials and consolations. So our job as a meditator is to be willing to go through the trials, the difficulties, the dark nights where you want to get something for the senses, you want to think something, remember things. You want to go back to your familiar ground. The rabbit wants to go back to the testing lab, right? If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry about that. And then every so often you get these consolations, so these sudden bright states of mind that start to arise spontaneously, that they say are the rewards from God to try and encourage you along the path. In Buddhism, we don't really bring God into the issue. I'm quite happy with the term myself. So these enlightenment experiences then start to spontaneously arise from time to time in different ways. There's no real teaching about that. You have to trust your instincts. Both St. Teresa and St. John said that if these experiences come from something bad, they call the devil, I don't want to go that extreme, ignore it and it won't be able to affect you in a negative way. If they come from God, you ignore it because whatever the effect was designed to have, it's had. So Buddhism has the same approach. These spontaneous experiences of oneness or brightness, a concentration of energy, a lot of it body-based, coming through the body. You don't need to hold on to it or attach to it or to try to find a ways to get to it. You just leave it. It's having the right effect if it's coming from a good place already. So we respond with non-attachment to it and we continue with our practice. So that's the sonic boom. That's when the thing comes at you. Monks aren't supposed to talk about their own experiences, but I can tell you one. Sitting in my chair the other day, I haven't been meditating for a while because visa stuff, and I got bad back, and then I had a load of chanting to do, and I had a lot of running around, and quite often I don't lie down to sleep, I just sit in a chair. It's a way to stop yourself from sleeping too deeply. I'm not recommending it, I'm just saying I do that sometimes. So I was sitting in my chair and I have my feet up on a yoga ball. So I go into sleep, but if I fall into too deep sleep, my feet fall off and I wake up. So it's kind of a way to bring awareness to sleep. And I was lying there having a weird dream. I could kind of recall the dream, and then suddenly just like a powerful punch, like a sudden jolt where the consciousness gets suddenly yanked as if by the hair, violently, and then suddenly like wider awake as if I'd been thrown out of an aeroplane. You wouldn't be dreaming or sleeping or thinking about mortgages and visas if you're thrown out of an aeroplane. Attention was just and this the beautiful consciousness just went spread through my body. It's like, now I can't tell you much about it because the point of many of these experiences is you aren't there. It's when you get out of the way that these things can start to arise. So I only know what I thought about it after it had happened, which is annoying because I want to remember it and at least re-enjoy it a little bit. But so I can only remember the thoughts that I had about this experience after I'd had it. So these kind of spontaneous awakenings, and sometimes teachings too, you just suddenly know something. That one way you know that this is kind of the beginnings of awakening is because you can't put that knowledge into words. It's hard, you can't say what it is that you suddenly know now that you didn't know 5 seconds ago. So these kind of awakenings start to happen. These are the results of good practice. These are what I call the sonic booms, where suddenly everything kind of piled. And if you know how sonic booms work, right? Because the aeroplane is going faster than the speed of sound, so the sound kind of builds up behind it, and then as the sound is trying to catch up with the plane, it'll hit you with a sudden. So our job is to drive the aeroplane. The sonic booms are something that catch up with us from time to time and start to bring into being this awakening. When these kind of things happen, by the way, you'll be long past needing like teachings and practices. It starts to get very spontaneous. You can feel your way and what you're doing, and you can talk to other people who are in completely other traditions, and they're reporting the very same kinds of things. Anyway, that's it. We didn't get quite to enlightenment, but that's as far as as far as I can go. Is all clear enough? I think Ogden Nash had this little poem. He said, "It was clear as mud, but we covered the ground. The confusion made my head spin round." Anybody have a question or comment? Don't be shy.
Last chance for a long time.
Yeah. I don't know, really. I don't go to many temples, and also often you find the best meditation at meditation retreats, not in temples. Temples very often are community centers more than meditation centers, and they can be noisy and busy and hard to find what's things going on. On the other hand, there's one Satpatum temple is one. They used to have a meditation every evening, which I quite liked. Because I was actually working for a royal foundation, which was at the Satpatum Palace, which is next to the Satpatum Temple. But in Thai, Satpatum Palace is Wang Satpatum, and the temple is Wat Satpatum. And every day I'd go to my job there. I was working for a few months. I'd say to a taxi driver, Wang Satpatum. They go, Wat Satpatum? No, not Wat, Wang Satpatum. And they say, yes, Wat Satpatum. And this would go on every morning, over and over and over, because they just can't get it into the mind. And so that had a nice evening meditation every evening. If you're ever on the other end of Sukhumvit, I don't know if you've been recently, Wat Tamamongkon, Sukhumvit 101 to 103. You can go in both ways. That's quite a good meditation temple if you're up at that end of thing. But yeah, you just have to look around. My own temple, Wat Pak Nam, has a meditation every morning and every evening. But yeah, you just have to look around.
The effects that you were talking about, or experiences, is it more a matter of question of repetition or duration? Continue each and one, or can you amplify such a thing?
The sonic boom experiences usually happen just in an instant, usually like for a few seconds, and then they leave a kind of startlement, like, oh, right, and then that kind of lasts for a while. But yeah, usually just for a few seconds. I'm a little cautious about this, because in Buddhism we don't really talk about it, but sometimes a knowledge just gets given to you. But it comes like you know the whole thing. It's not like sentences, like blah, 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 blah. It's like you just know the whole thing, like, and that's why it's hard to verbalize, because you didn't get it verbally, you just kind of know it. I remember one very clearly. I was in India, and I looked in a lake, or a still pond off a bridge, and I saw my reflection, and I suddenly knew that's not me. Now that might sound weird, because you'd probably think that, well, it's obviously not you, it's your reflection. But it just hit with a force like that you can't verbalize. So yeah, usually those kind of things, they just happen for a few instants, a few seconds, and they come complete. Yeah. Then the aftermath can last for a while sometimes. Yeah.
Maybe just to follow up on that question, after a while, after you sit for a while, observing your breath, what certain impact or the something that happens to your body or your mind that you notice that this is the benefit of the meditation you just had?
The benefits of the meditation is awareness that arises. You start to get this self-knowing, and you see your processes. So you see, especially the pushing and pulling of what we call Vedana, liking and disliking, and see just how much this liking and disliking deludes you, that you chase things that you like, that when you actually look at it, you don't even like that much. You just thought you did. And you avoid things that you dislike, that suddenly you realize the disliking isn't as severe as I thought it was. So the liking and the disliking, the citta, the mind in is bright or dull, is in lust, greed, hatred or delusion, it's expanded or contracted. So these are the kind of proximate benefits that we get from meditation.
Sorry.
Yes, but then there is the when the mind comes together in the concentration, this is another layer that you start to experience states of consciousness that normal people don't experience. Namely, when the consciousness comes together and becomes bright, when it gathers and unifies. You're like, oh, that's not something I ever learned about at school. This is what happens when you step outside of the Maya, the normal conceptual universe where we live, where we spend our time. So it's a kind of breakout or breakthrough experience. And it starts to eat away at... It's not that you correct all the defaults in your character and become a beautiful person and spiritual. It's you kind of just drop it all and you're moving into something new. I was quite relieved about this because I have a lot of defects in my character. A lot of things. I remember one Ajahn I used to live with, he'd always say to me, you've got a lot of projects to work on. But yeah, you drop it. You don't have to purify your entire being. You actually see something else. Yeah. At the back. I think the last one, and then we can wrap up.
I really like that question and answer, and I wanted to ask a really specific one, just two different ones. So when I'm meditating, I'm thinking, oh, this guy that I met at working, right, yesterday, he was so nice. I just don't want to go back, and I don't want to see him. What if you had a thought like that? What would it be like? Like when you said, is recognizing the lights in this place. That's an example of dislike that I have.
Right.
So am I thinking, oh, recognize that dislike and just move on, or
The best insight that you can have with something like that is you hear the thought. And that's not me thinking that thought. You just hear that thought come up, like, I can't stand this guy. And actually, I can stand this guy. Yeah, I bet you don't dislike him as much as you think you do. The disliking comes from the thinking. It's driven by the thinking. Thinking creates the emotions feed back into the thinking, and it comes up. I had a boss who I really disliked. He was, I don't know if this is relevant, but he was German. And none of us liked him very much, and he was, he's kind of black hair and brown eyes, and one day he came up and we said to him, oh, Hitler wouldn't like you, he liked blonde hair and blue-eyed Aryan people, he wouldn't have any time for you. That's a bit cruel, isn't it? But I wasn't a monk at this time, it's before I was a monk. And he said, he suddenly became really offended, he said, do you mind? Like, that's not acceptable. He said, my grandfather died in a Nazi concentration camp. And we're like, oh, sorry. He said, yeah, he got drunk and fell off the tower. And then after he said that joke, suddenly it just opened a thing, like, actually this guy has a sense of humor. He's actually quite a nice person. And then all of that disliking of this guy, suddenly, it's like, yeah, he's not that bad. So don't believe your thoughts. Note this spiral of thoughts feeding into a mood and emotion. The mood and emotion feeds into more thoughts, and it ramps up and up and up and up. And then, yeah, you drag yourself into a pit. If you can practice the beautiful states of mind, you can share that with him too. Do the metta, loving kindness, you can bring them into it. Don't start with him though, start with something. Start with something that will help to generate the good state of mind. Here's the thing. You've recognized that this is a problem. You have to find a way to disentangle from it. And that's what our practice is disentangling from this stuff of the mind to move into purified consciousness. It's a practice and a difficulty. You have to do it, and you will find a way to do it if you keep trying. Yeah. Okay.
I think that's a very nice end for another wonderful talk. I really enjoyed this one, really very good one. The end of a very nice series of talk that we had with you over the last couple of months, and hopefully not the end of the very long series of talk that started here in 2007. As we heard at the beginning of the meeting, Pandit will be going away for some time, and no doubt we all wish him the very best on the different retreats that he's going to. Have a nice time on the beach south of Hua-Hin, safe journey to Germany or wherever it may lead you. And hopefully one day you'll be back here and we will welcome you. You can always come to Reelbank without having to fill out any form whatsoever. Then, of course, impermanence is there, so for the time being, no more Pandit, but that doesn't mean that we don't have anything else. Next week, we'll have Reggie Paul, an old friend of ours who's living in Kyoto in Japan, who knows a lot about Zen, and he's going to talk about that perspective of Buddhism from the Zen angle of view. And then in December, we'll have one Dhamma circle, and we have 2 visiting monks before we have a little Christmas break, and then we resume again in January. And then there's always the practical things. As many of you know, please help cleaning up the room by putting the brown chairs out there, and the white chairs, with 6 exceptions, go behind the curtain. And there's always the encouragement to show your gratitude to Pandit and to the Balnali Foundation by putting some money in the donation boxes. And to be even in fact much more appreciated for the ones who have to do the counting of the money, do that first before you have a nice chat with your friends or Pandit. With that, Pandit, could you please finalize?
Sabhitiyo vivajantu sabbarogo vinasatu mate bhavatwantarayo asukhitika yuko abhava abhivadana sili sanichang Buddha Pachayino Chattaro Dhamma Vadanti Ayuvano Sukhang Balang. Okay, thank you all for coming. See you next year at some point.
Some of us will go to the hidden cafe on the other side, and so everyone is welcome to join.
Hey, David. Marissa's website.
This is